14 million Americans over 65 fell last year, 1 in 4. And the vitamin most of them take to stop that, vitamin D, was reviewed by the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, which concluded it does not prevent falls. At all. But that conclusion has a loophole. Which side of it you are standing on comes down to one number in your own blood work. Medicare gives you that number for free. I spent years in emergency departments, and falls in older adults were a constant. Not dramatic ones, ordinary ones. A rug, a curb, a step down into a garage. And the fall almost never came out of nowhere. It came after months of legs quietly getting weaker while nobody measured anything. Dale was 71, a retired mail carrier in Des Moines. For 30 years, his legs were his job, 10 miles a day, 6 days a week, through Iowa winters. When he retired, he did what a careful person does. He bought supplements, a drawer full of them. And by 71, he needed both hands on his recliner to stand up, and he had stopped going down to the basement because he did not trust the stairs. Here is where I have to be straight with you, because the internet is not. Dale's legs were not weak because a bottle was missing from that drawer. They were weak because of sarcopenia, the gradual loss of muscle mass and strength that comes with age. That is the engine. It is driven mostly by how little load his legs had carried since he stopped walking that route, and by how little protein he was eating. Nutrition is one layer of that. One. Not the root cause, not the secret, not something anyone is hiding from you. Nobody is hiding it. Vitamin D sits on the shelf at every Walgreens in America for about $8. But why is that layer worth the next 25 minutes? Because it is the layer you can fix this week. You cannot undo 30 years. You can fix a deficiency. And in the people who actually have one, fixing it does measurable things to their legs. So here is the plan. 3 nutrients, ranked from the one that helps the fewest people to the one that helps the most, for each. What it does, what the evidence shows, what to do tonight. I will also tell you when a nutrient is not the answer, because 2 of these 3 are sold with promises the research does not support. And near the middle, I will give you one test to ask for, by name, that settles the whole question for you. So, which one matters for the fewest of you? We start there, which is not the same as saying it does not matter. Number 3, vitamin B12. I am starting here because B12 is the most oversold and the most genuinely important nutrient on this list at the same time. Both are true. The difference is which person you are. B12 does not build muscle, let me say that plainly, because you will read otherwise tonight. B12 does not make your thighs stronger. What it does is maintain myelin, the fatty insulation wrapped around your nerves. Think of the wiring in an old house. The copper is usually fine. It is the rubber sheathing around it that cracks and frays, and once it does, the signal gets unreliable. That is myelin. Your brain tells your calf to lift, and through frayed insulation, the message arrives late, or weak, or scrambled. So a person with real B12 deficiency does not have weak muscles. Exactly. Their muscles are not being told what to do on time. It shows up as numbness in the feet, pins and needles, a toe that catches on carpet. In the ER, the tell I looked for was balance that fell apart in the dark, steady to the bathroom with the light on, unsteady with it off. Nerves, not muscles. Now the number. And here I have to correct something you have almost certainly been told. You will hear that 43% of people over 60 are low in B12. That figure is everywhere. Here is the actual source. The National Institutes of Health office that publishes the B12 fact sheet says that somewhere between 3% and 43% of community-dwelling older adults are deficient, depending on the population studied and the test used, 3 to 43. That is not a statistic. That is a shrug. Somebody took the top of that range, threw away the bottom, and sold you the scary end. But underneath the shrug, there is something useful. The spread is that wide because deficiency is not random. It clusters in people with specific, identifiable reasons to be deficient. And if you know the reasons, you stop guessing about yourself. So what is the main one? Atrophic gastritis. A thinning of the stomach lining that becomes more common with age and cuts your stomach acid. You need that acid to pry B12 loose from the protein in your food. In one study looking at exactly this, 38% of people with atrophic gastritis were B12 deficient, compared with 21% of people on a proton pump inhibitor and 15% of controls. Read that again. All three. With none of this going on, your risk is about 1 in 7. With a thin stomach lining, 2 in 5. So who is actually at risk? If you have been on a proton pump inhibitor for reflux for years, omeprazole, Prilosec, Nexium, you are on the list. If you take metformin, you are on the list because it interferes with B12 absorption in the small intestine. If you have had weight loss surgery or you eat little or no animal food, you are on the list. If none of that is you and your feet feel normal, B12 is probably not your problem, and I would rather you spent the money on groceries. If some of that is you, here is the move. Ask for a B12 level at your next visit. Cheap, ordinary blood test. And notice what that is. A test, not a purchase. Hold on to that because it is the pattern for this entire video. One honest caution. B12 and folate deficiency can look identical on paper, and taking high-dose B12 blindly can mask a folate problem while nerve damage continues underneath. One more reason to check instead of guess. That is the nerve layer. Real, but narrow. The next one is not narrow at all. About half of you are short on it, and almost everything you have been told about why it matters is wrong. Number 2, magnesium. 2 quick admissions. Magnesium is not a vitamin, it is a mineral, and lists like this include it anyway because it belongs in the conversation. And it is the most misrepresented thing in the aisle, aimed at your legs. The honest part first. Roughly half of Americans take in less magnesium than the estimated requirement for their age and sex. That is N. Haynes, the federal survey that has sampled what Americans actually eat for decades. Men over 71 are among the worst off in the whole data set, and magnesium genuinely matters for muscle. Every fiber you own runs on ATP, your cellular fuel, and ATP is unusable unless bound to magnesium. Calcium flooding into a muscle cell is the signal to contract. Magnesium is part of what tells it to let go. So the story writes itself, doesn't it? Magnesium helps muscles relax. Half of you are low. Your legs cramp at night. Therefore, magnesium fixes night cramps. That sells a lot of bottles. It is also wrong. And we know because somebody bothered to test it. In 2017, a randomized trial in JAMA Internal Medicine took adults 60 and older with nocturnal leg cramps and gave half of them magnesium oxide and half a placebo. The magnesium group got better. Cramps dropped about 40%. The placebo group got better too, by about the same amount. Sit with that because it explains why this supplement will never die. The people on magnesium genuinely improved. They were not imagining it. And the sugar pill did the same thing. Cochrane, which pools trials rather than running them, went over 11 randomized trials covering 735 people and landed in the same place. For older adults with ordinary night cramps and no other cause, magnesium is unlikely to give a benefit you would notice. Now, somebody watching is already arguing with me, because I have had this argument at bedsides. I started magnesium. My cramps got better, so it worked. And I believe you. Your cramps did get better. That is exactly what happened in the trial, to both groups. 2 things are going on. Night cramps come and go in waves, and people start a supplement during their worst week, the week most likely to be followed by a better one. And the placebo effect on a symptom you report yourself is enormous, about 40%, as it turns out. So am I telling you to throw it out? No, something more useful. Stop buying magnesium to stop cramps. and start eating magnesium because your muscles run on it. That is not a dodge. It is a different action. The failed trials tested a pill against a symptom. None of them showed that a country where half the people fall short of a mineral their fuel depends on is a country in good shape. And food does two jobs at once because magnesium lives in the same foods carrying your protein and your fiber. Almonds, pumpkin seeds, black beans, spinach, dark chocolate, genuinely. That is a $15 list at Kroger, and none of it needs a bottle. If you take the supplement anyway because it is cheap and helps you sleep, that is defensible, and I will not fight you. Two things, though. Magnesium oxide, the cheapest form and the one in most bottles, is poorly absorbed. And if you have chronic kidney disease, ask your doctor first. Your kidneys are what clear magnesium, and this is one of the few places a harmless supplement stops being harmless. That is the honest version. A real intake gap, a muscle that needs it, and a cramp cure that does not exist. Which brings us to the top of the list. The most evidence, the loudest argument, and the number I promised you in the first 30 seconds. Number 1, vitamin D. Here is the part I actually made this video for. If you remember nothing else, remember the next 4 minutes. Start with why vitamin D is on a list about legs at all. Most people file it under bones. But muscle fibers carry vitamin D receptors, and the ones with the most of them are fast twitch. Those are the fibers you use to catch yourself. When your heel slides on an icy Des Moines driveway, the muscle that fires to save you is fast twitch. It is also the fiber type sarcopenia takes first. That is why this shows up as falling rather than as weakness. People do not notice a slow decline in a muscle they only use in emergencies. They notice the emergency. A 2025 review in the journal Biomedicines pulled together the observational studies and the trials on vitamin D and sarcopenia. Below 20 nanograms per milliliter, which is how your lab reports it, your vitamin D is tied to less strength, worse physical performance, and more sarcopenia. And the evidence points to levels above 30 as the range that better holds onto muscle mass and strength and keeps people from sliding into sarcopenia and frailty. So, get everybody to 30 and stop the falls, right? No. And this is the whole thing. In December 2024, the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, the panel that decides which preventive services get recommended in this country, put out a draft that concluded with moderate certainty that vitamin D, with or without calcium, has no net benefit for the primary prevention of falls or fractures in community-dwelling adults 60 and over, which means you. Not a small benefit, no net benefit. They reviewed 20 randomized trials. No reduction in falls, no reduction in fractures, no reduction in death, and a small increase in kidney stones. That is a D recommendation. The National Screening Panel, telling healthy, older Americans like you not to take vitamin D to prevent falling. Now, hold that next to this. Also in 2024, a network meta-analysis in BMC Geriatrics pooled 35 randomized trials covering 58,937 older adults and found that vitamin D at 800 to 1,000 international units a day did lower falls by around 15 to 22%, depending on how you cut it. Two serious 2024 analyses. Same vitamin, same outcome. Opposite answers. Most people, when they hit two studies that disagree, decide the science is a mess and give up. Do not do that here, because these two do not actually disagree. They answer different questions, and the gap between them is the most useful thing in this video. Look at where the meta-analysis found its effect. The 800 to 1,000 unit dose significantly cut falls in people whose blood level was at or below 50 nanomoles per liter, which is 20 nanograms per milliliter in American units. In people above that line, it did not. And doses above 1,000 units a day were worse than the 800 to 1,000 band, not better. More was not more. More was worse. So read the two together, and the contradiction dissolves. The task force asked, should we hand vitamin D to every older American to prevent falls? The answer is no, and they are right. The meta-analysis asked, does vitamin D prevent falls in the people who are actually deficient? The answer is yes, and they are also right. The vitamin helps the deficient. It does nothing for everyone else. And a trial that mixes both groups together dilutes a real effect in one group with zero effect in a much larger group and reports an average of roughly nothing, which is exactly what the average is. It is also exactly what makes the average useless to you personally, because you are not an average. You are one person on one side of a line at 20 nanograms per milliliter. And that means the single most useful thing in this entire video is not something to swallow. It is 4 words to say out loud at your next appointment. Ask for a 25-hydroxy vitamin D test. That is the name. 25-hydroxy vitamin D. Not check my vitamins, which gets you nothing, the specific test. And if you are on Medicare, the annual wellness visit is the one appointment with no copay and no deductible attached, and most people never schedule it. That visit is the natural place to ask. 1 square note, because I said I would not sell you anything. Medicare does not blanket cover vitamin D testing for people with no risk factors and no symptoms. It is covered when there is a reason to check. So ask the question that gets you there. Given my age, my falls, and my medications, is a 25-hydroxy vitamin D level reasonable, and is it covered for me? That question is free, and it is the difference between guessing and knowing. Then the number tells you what to do, and it is refreshingly boring. Under 20, you have found something real and worth correcting, and 800 to 1,000 units a day is the dose the evidence supports. Between 20 and 30, a conversation. Above 30, vitamin D is not your problem, and the drawer full of bottles will not save your legs. Something else will, and it is next. So let's talk about what was actually missing from Dale's drawer. It was never in the drawer. It was on his kitchen table 3 times a day, and it is why his vitamin D would not have saved him even if his level had been perfect. A 2025 review of nutrition and sarcopenia found something the supplement aisle has no interest in telling you. Vitamin D on its own is a modest player. Vitamin D combined with protein, whey, or the branch-chain amino acids improved muscle strength independent of exercise. Independent of exercise. I use that phrase carefully. It means the food did work the pill could not do alone. Vitamin D is not a builder. It is closer to a foreman. It can direct the job and signal and regulate. But a foreman with no lumber on site builds nothing. Protein is the lumber. This is why people take vitamin D for 2 years, feel nothing, and conclude it is a scam. It is not a scam. It was standing on an empty lot. Now here is the American version of this problem. Check yourself against it honestly. Picture your breakfast. Coffee. Maybe toast, maybe cereal, maybe nothing. Now picture your dinner. Chicken or fish or a pork chop. Most Americans, and older Americans especially, eat almost no protein until evening and then eat most of a day's worth in one sitting. The trouble is that muscle has no savings account. Muscle protein synthesis, the actual building process, switches on when a meal clears a threshold of protein, then switches off. Most researchers put that threshold around 25 to 30 grams in one sitting. Clear it, and the machinery runs. Miss it, and it does not run at all. And the extra you pile on at dinner is not carried back to breakfast. You cannot bank it. So a typical American day gives your legs 1 chance out of 3 to rebuild, and then we wonder why the legs are losing. Which brings me to a piece of advice I want to take apart, because you will find it in 100 videos like this one. You will be told to keep your last meal light, small, easy to digest, so your body can spend the night repairing instead of digesting. That is precisely backwards. There is nothing magic about the hours you are asleep. Your body is not waiting for an empty stomach to start repairing. It is waiting for raw material. Telling a 71-year-old with sarcopenia to eat less protein at the one meal where he reliably eats any is not a recovery strategy. It is a way to miss the last threshold of the day. So here is what I would actually do, and none of it involves a bottle. Get protein into breakfast. Highest leverage change in this video, and the one nobody makes. 2 eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, leftover chicken, which sounds strange at 7 in the morning for about a week and then stops. You are clearing a threshold, not eating perfectly. Get protein into lunch, a can of tuna, beans in the soup, not a bagel. Then keep your dinner exactly where it is. It was the one meal you were already getting right. And take your vitamin D with that dinner, if you are taking it. Not because bedtime unlocks a repair window. That claim gets made constantly, and there is no good evidence for it. Take it with dinner because vitamin D is fat-soluble, meaning it needs fat to be absorbed at all, and dinner is where the fat in an American day lives. It is also the meal you never forget. That is the whole reason evening dosing works. A much less exciting reason than the one you were sold, and a true one. One more thing, and it is the one Dale needed most. Protein is lumber, but somebody has to ask for the building. That request is load. 10 sit-to-stands out of a kitchen chair, no hands, once a day. That is it. That is the ask. Your legs do not know what a gym is. They know whether they were asked to lift you today. Now, the part that is not about nutrition at all, because some leg weakness is not a deficiency and you need to be able to tell. If weakness comes on suddenly, over minutes or hours, especially on one side, that is not a vitamin. That is a stroke until proven otherwise. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Call 911. Do not drive yourself and do not let your spouse drive you. The ambulance starts treatment on the way, and the ER sees you faster when you arrive by EMS. Those minutes are the ones you do not get back. New leg weakness with back pain or with any change in your bladder or bowels is an ER visit today. Weakness with new shortness of breath or chest pressure is 911. Everything below that has a calmer ladder. Notice it and see whether it is still there tomorrow. Write it down. What happened, when, how long, what you were doing. Bring a stable pattern to your next scheduled visit. If it is new, persistent, or getting worse, call your primary care doctor and ask to be seen this week. If it needs attention today but is not an emergency, urgent care is the right door, and far cheaper and faster than the ER. And I know what a bill does to a decision. I am not going to pretend otherwise. But weigh it honestly. A blood draw is cheap, and the fall it might prevent is the most expensive thing on this list. Not just the hospital bill, the stairs you stop trusting afterward. So, let me bring this together. 3 nutrients, ranked. B12 protects the wiring, and it matters if you are on a proton pump inhibitor or metformin, and mostly does not if you are not. Magnesium is a real intake gap and a fake cramp cure, so eat it and stop buying it. Vitamin D is the biggest of the 3, and it works only for the people who are actually short of it. And if you remember one thing, remember the shape underneath all 3. Every single one of them came down to the same move. Not a purchase, a number. B12 level, vitamin D level. The question of who you are before the question of what you take. That is the difference between the drawer in Dale's kitchen and an answer. Dale, by the way, was under 20. He had been swallowing 5,000 units a day of a vitamin D his gut had never been asked to absorb on an empty stomach at bedtime for years. He was not lazy. He was doing everything he had been told. He just had never been measured. So here is your one thing for this week. Not the drawer. Call your doctor's office and ask what it takes to get a 25-hydroxy vitamin D level, and if you are on Medicare, ask them to schedule your annual wellness visit while you have them on the phone. It costs you nothing, and most people never book it. Then tonight, while you are up, 10 sit-to-stands out of a kitchen chair. No hands. That is the whole assignment. You do not need perfection here. You need one number and one chair. Your legs carried you for 70 years. They will keep going a good while longer. But they need to be asked, and they need to be fed. And once in a while, somebody has to actually check. If someone in your family is standing up with both hands on the armrests, send them this. That is the sign. That is where it starts.